Garnet, investors purchase the property with the intention of buy and hold, and then it seems like they forget how to manage the property, and then it can all go to absolute shit. So today what we're talking about is the 5 biggest mistakes, and we could have went 10 or 20 or 30 biggest mistakes because there's so many mistakes that landlords make, and we're hoping to uncover them to help you as a landlord or property manager to prevent yourself running into these same mistakes. I'm here with Garnet Coria, the owner and operator, co-owner of AG Property Services, a very affluent, very successful property management group here in Edmonton. Garnet, how you doing?
Very good, Calvin. Excited to be here.
Property managers do not have it easy. If you want to see some of the worst Google ratings in like the history of Google ratings, I swear to God, property managers always have the worst because you're either pissing off the tenant or you're either pissing off the landlord that hired you. How do you do it, and how do you balance that relationship? Because it's difficult to achieve the win-win in all scenarios.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to just, I'd say number one is communication and open communication, just explaining things to both sides. Because yeah, again, when some tenants are not happy with, when an owner doesn't want to do some cosmetic renovations or things that they don't think are functionally working, it's always tough, like you said, just trying to mitigate and trying to balance both sides so that there is a win-win.
Yeah, yeah. Not a lot of people can do property management. And if property management's one of the main reasons why you as an investor are avoiding buy and holds, that's where you hire it out. That's where you get professionals that have systems, plans in place to allow for any scenario that might take on, right? And I do think that, here in Alberta, property managers probably have it, would you say, slightly easier to be able to have more freedom than if you were in Ontario or BC?
I would agree with that. Yep.
Why do we have it easier in Alberta?
I'd say one of them obviously is just our legal system and the process. I mean, when we were out in Ontario for a conference a few months back, we were just chatting with some of the investors there, and some guys are talking about trying to evict their tenants for 12 or 18 months, right? So you got to imagine tenants that's not paying rent, you're bleeding every month. You're trying to scramble and find out how you're going to be paying these mortgages, but then on top of that, after the tenant leaves, you probably have a whole whack of renovations and repairs you've got to take care of, right? Whereas in Alberta here, we're in, we have an Archie's hearing within 3 to 4 weeks. So it's obviously just the turnaround time is just a lot quicker here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So many different advantages, and we've just skimmed the surface on it. So Garnet, what are the top 5? Let's start with number 1. What's number 1 mistake that landlords make when it comes to property management?
Well, Calvin, you're going to like this one. Number 1, I'd say, is when owners are not working with an investor-focused realtor. I'd say that's the first number 1 problem, because it's really important that you're working with someone that understands markets, current market conditions, areas within that city and the market that you're in. You've got a great city map of kind of the A, B, C, D areas of the city. So if you haven't connected with Calvin and his team about that, definitely reach out to them. They can send you a map kind of Edmonton, because it's really well done. And again, the part of the reason why that's just so important is you want to make sure that you're lining up your goals as an investor, right? I mean, what are the 4 things that you look at? You're looking at for appreciation, looking for cash flow. What were the other ones? The other 2 that you had?
Tenant profile and vacancy. And
That's right.
so, yeah, one of the exercises that we do is you put those in order of what's most important to you to least important, and that will help guide us into locations that will best suit your goals. And I think, to your point, I actually would have never guessed the number 1 that you picked, but it makes actually a lot of sense, because think about how hard you have it, Garnet, is where they come in and they expect that they're going to get the same result or this type of results in this location and type of property they purchased with the strategy they decided, and they were never set up for success in the beginning. I mean, how do you even accomplish what their expectations are if they didn't purchase in the right location based on their goals, the right type of property to allow them for a certain type of cash flow, And sometimes you could be held in a really tough position. I mean, that just shows how much harder it actually is.
It does.
We make your life easier if we're purchasing in an area where it's like, hey, we can expect roughly this amount of cash flow, this amount of vacancy, rents are already approved by the property manager prior to you purchasing, and maybe even more conservative, knowing that the rents might be going through a little bit of a contraction here in the later half of this year. And then you're ending up with actually being able to produce the results they expect, as opposed to them getting into a property and then just being pissed off at you and thinking that you're the problem when they never actually set themselves up for success in the first place.
That's exactly it. And I mean, and not to say, I mean, again, we manage lots of properties in those C and D areas because, again, often the cash flow is a little bit better in those areas. And I got some investors that they'll only buy in D areas because they're just heavy into cash flow. They want to hold these things long term for 15, 20 years, so they're okay with that. But you just got to understand that, the way to really generate wealth is obviously, there's cash flow, there's the mortgage buy down, but then also that appreciation, right? So some of these areas in the D areas, and again, even C areas sometimes become C plus or maybe a B minus over time. And we're seeing a lot of that on the west side of the city with a lot of development, right? Where a lot of guys are looking at the long-term play with the LRT and everything that's coming in and on these infills. But again, those are still kind of the C areas, I would say, or C plus. But yeah, these D areas, I mean, some of these guys have held them for 10, 15 years and whatever they paid for it, they're kind of selling for that in, 7 or 10 years down the road, which is kind of unfortunate. But again, they're just banking on they got higher cash flow and they're okay with that. And then obviously just the mortgage buy down too, of course, right?
Definitely. Okay, so we got number one. What's number two?
So number two, so when you're looking at deals, underwriting them, or at least to put an offer in and you're in the conditional phase, making sure you've got a good team when it comes to inspectors and trades, I would say. So that will really help you be able to come up and underwrite this deal, and it'll actually help you. Could actually end up saving you thousands of dollars in negotiations, right? Because your inspector was good, he was really thorough, was able to find things with the building, make you aware of potential things that you need to budget for in the future. Make sure you've got money set aside for those capital expenditures, and so you don't have any surprise where you buy the building and it's like, oh, now I've got to do the roof on this thing. I wasn't aware that there was a leak, and this could be a $70,000 or $80,000 on this roof, right? And you got to replace it. So yeah, making sure you have those a good inspector, and then obviously trades too that you rely on, right? You have a good plumber or handyman, electrician, things they can give you pricing on some of these issues and do the walkthroughs with you. To really give you an idea so you can create a budget, because again, no one wants to wake up and be a slumlord, but that happens because of just poor planning, and they just didn't have things set aside to plan for these repairs and maintenance and things like that, right?
And so number one and number two definitely fall within the poor planning or poor due diligence that's administered by the buyer entering into this purchase. And getting into the wrong purchase can be more expensive than not getting into it at all. And you talked about another common trend is having the right team, not only with the agent or whoever's going to be representing you, in ensuring that there's some level of confidence of what you're getting into and it does relate back to your goals, but also, again, are you getting a contractor in there, your team members, so they're able to spot some of the larger capital expenditures, maintenance items, so then you have less surprises. What's number three?
Number three is, of course, vacancies. So those can be expensive. And again, this also kind of comes back to buying in the right area, right? I mean, again, we're going to see a lot less turnover or, more stable tenants, I would say, in those A and B areas versus, again, in the C and D areas, you're going to see a little bit more transit people, or, sometimes in these buildings, unfortunately, the reality is your good tenants end up often leaving those C or D areas because they've maybe got better employment, or their relationship status has changed, and now they're making a jump into maybe a better area, or they want to start a family, and being in that C or D area is just not what where they want to be, right? Being proactive with vacancies. So for us, like our lease renewal notices, we like to get those out usually about 60 days before, so we can have a conversation. If your costs have gone up, having an honest conversation with the tenant, saying, hey, proper tax, insurance, just renewed the mortgage, it's gone out X amount, but again, just having that open conversation with them, explain to the tenants, here's the reality of it. You know, personally, I like to keep my rents. If I got good tenants in there, I'm okay with being 50 or 75 bucks below market to keep a good tenant in there. So instead of increasing, you know, doing a $150 or $200 rent increase, just tell them, hey, you know, here's where the market is, and maybe have that conversation. Send them some comps that you can find on Rent Faster, and say, hey, you know, you've been a great tenant. We'd love to keep you, but the reality is this is a business for us. We need to increase the rents, and maybe you only do a $75 rent increase or $100, right? And then again, most tenants are very appreciative, and generally the tenants are aware. Like again, if you're a good landlord, the tenants are willing to take those increases because they know if they have an issue, you're going to take care of the issue, right? So, you know, for them, they see some merit in the increase, and again, there's no guarantee that they go rent from another landlord and they're as good as you, right?
Yeah.
So trying to manage that. So of course, and then for us as a third party, it's always a little bit difficult because we are, you know, trying to manage the expectation of the owners to, you know, maximize the rents, but we also don't want to push tenants out of properties that are good, reliable tenants and stable. So, you know, some ways that we do that as well is, you know, if tenants are looking for like a shorter term, you know, 6 month, sometimes we charge a little bit of premium for that for owners too. You know, so maybe a 6 month lease, they'll do at a, you know, only a $50 or $100 increase, but hey, you know, maybe we'll keep it the same for another year if you're willing to sign a 1 year extension with us, right? So we just want to limit those vacancies because at vacancy turnover, you've got to deal with you know, there might be paint touch-ups that need to be done. Maybe blinds that are just old and yellow and brittle from the sun need to be replaced. You notice, you know, kitchen faucets that are leaking or old. There's just a whole whack of little things that just can add up. So it's not even just that expensive the turnover, but then you also might end up having a vacancy or 2 week vacancy between tenancies and something like that, right? So it can compound, right? Where it just that end up being a costly turnover for you to improve that property, right? Whereas the current tenant in there, he might be okay with this squeaky washing machine or the squeaky fan that he didn't report, but at move out, you do the move out inspection. It's like, oh, you find all these little things that, again, the tenant was okay living with, but you've got to fix them and rectify them now, trying to re-rent that property, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, these are just some of the great points that Garnet is touching on today. And you're going to be able to meet Garnet at Recon September 6th and 7th, as he's a proud sponsor of ours. And we're so happy to work with Garnet, and we always trust anybody we ever send Garnet because I know that they're always going to be happy. And I think you always have the best intention with everybody you work with, right? You truly care, and it comes across in your work on a day-to-day basis. So you're going to have the ability to see Garnet on stage, learn from one of the best property managers in the business, ask any questions you need to help you out. Maybe it's an introduction and the ability to get him to even manage some of your properties. But I know that he's a great resource, and it's all about having the right team, and that also starts with property management as well. So we're excited to see everybody at Recon. Tickets are selling very, very fast. So we're getting close. We're getting very, very close. Now, this segment is sponsored by Recon, so we're going to play a little game called This or That, and Garnet's going to go ahead and tell us which has the greatest turnover. And if he doesn't have an answer, he has to announce something anyways. It's only A or B. Garnet, are you ready? What has a greater turnover? North Edmonton or South Edmonton?
I would say North Edmonton.
Okay. What has a greater turnover of leases, west or east?
Are we talking northeast?
We're gonna go general central east to
Okay.
central west.
More turnover, I would say, would be the west side.
Okay.
Central west.
Okay, so central east would be like Capilano, Fulton,
That's
all
right.
that stuff.
Oh, well.
Over, okay, and that would
Again,
be
like versus
Meadowlark.
like Glenwood,
Okay.
you know, West Jasper, things like that.
St. Albert or Sherwood Park?
Ooh, both are like those. I love both those areas. There are definitely fewer rentals, I would say, in St. Albert versus Sherwood Park, I think, just based on our portfolio that we manage. Oh, that's honestly, that's
It's only this or that. There's no in between.
okay. Well, let's go with Sherwood Park. More turnover.
More turnover in Sherwood Park?
Yep.
Okay. St. Albert or South Edmonton?
South Edmonton.
Okay. And again, that's where you have the higher turnover. Okay. So St. Albert's winning. St. Albert or Central East?
I would say Central East.
Okay. St. Albert versus we'll just bundle it all.
Yeah.
Versus Fort Saskatchewan, Beaumont, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, Leduc.
Most turnover, I would probably say in those areas, we're probably would say Leduc,
Okay. So the reigning champion of where you've experienced the lowest turnover is.
St. Albert.
No kidding, hey?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And part of the reason too is I find that a lot of the families that grew up and lived in St. Albert, they love it there and they just don't want to leave. So we get a lot of young professionals or young people that are starting out, they just rent the basement suite. But yeah, it's just a lot of their family, they've grew up there and they just want to stay there. So again, there aren't a whole lot of rentals up there. So again, we do see a little bit of a premium for the rents up there as well. But of course, that comes with, the costs are obviously a little bit higher than if you're looking at buying in Edmonton and things like that too. So
Of course. So we can't not continue this segment because once we talk about location, we talk about property type. So we're going to go with turnover. And so what has the higher turnover, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom apartments?
1 bedrooms for sure. Because yeah,
Two bed,
once. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms?
2 bedrooms.
2 bedrooms will have a higher turnover. Okay. Townhouses or apartments will have a higher turnover.
Apartments.
Townhouses or half duplexes?
Townhouses.
Okay. Half duplexes or single family detached?
Duplexes.
Main floor units or basement units?
Basement units.
So main floor units would see the least amount of turnover
When
in
you're comparing to a
retrospect.
basement, yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. And so would you say the reigning champion would be a single family home that has not been divided would be the reigning champion for the least amount of turnover?
I would agree with that.
And then if somebody purchased that single family detached in St. Albert, would you say that they are set up, they could be set up for some really good success on the lowest turnover?
I would say so, yes.
I feel like you're on the stand right now.
Yeah. No, I
That's
would
so
agree
much
with that.
valuable
And again,
information.
it's just once you've got families that are, again, love the community that they're in, kids start to go to school, like they're there for a long period, right? Like we've got lots, I would say lots, but probably about 10 or 15 single family houses that are rented in St. Albert. And generally, I say the average is 3 to 5 years, and then we start to see that turnover versus, a basement suite or main floor suite, it might be, between 1 to 3 years kind of thing. Whereas, yeah, with the single families, it's more like 3 to 5 years, I would say.
Completely agree with you. 100%. I have rentals in St. Albert, so I get to experience firsthand. My first rentals were in St. Albert in 2013. And so I don't want to say I got lucky, but I made the right choice early on. I just overspent on my renovations and didn't do proper burrs early on, which bit me in the butt. But at least I got the location right based on my goals.
That's right.
But again, the location doesn't mean you have to purchase St. Albert, right? There's D areas that might actually give you better results than what St. Albert is able to give you. Every area is going to have different pros and cons. Now, Garnet, what's number 4? What's the number 4 biggest mistake?
So
that
number
landlords
4
make?
is when you're looking at deals, let's say there's existing tenants in place. So 2 things. You're looking at the types of leases that are going to be in place, whether it is a fixed term lease or a periodic tenancy. And the reason for that is if let's say you're buying a multifamily building and you're expecting to be able to go in and just push the rents, because maybe at the current rents, it just doesn't make sense. You're going to be bleeding cash every month. You really need to understand when the last rent increase was, if they were all on month to month, because we've got to wait for 365 days to pass before you issue another rent increase, right? Or if they are month to month, there's been no rent increase for a while, you can go in there and obviously issue your 90-day rent increase, but at least then you can plan and budget for that. And number 2 would be during the conditional period, just making sure that you've got your move-in inspections in place for the existing properties with tenants that are in place. Because if you buy a property and you don't have an original move-in, you're buying that place as is in the condition today. So again, if that place is beat up, damaged, at the end of that tenancy, you're basically going to be responsible to to bear those costs, and you won't be able to charge back any repairs or cleaning or painting without that original move-in inspection. So making sure you've got that. I see that unfortunately, some of these other multifamilies have been managed, self-managed by owners in the past, and they just aren't great with paperwork. So, they kind of basically just did took a few photos and handed over the keys, and they thought that was an inspection. But you need to have a formal inspection that's handwritten, or sorry, that's actually documented, and both parties are signing off on agreeing to the condition. Because otherwise, like I said, you're basically buying the property, and as of today, whatever the condition is, my recommendation, if you don't have a movement inspection, that's fine. Again, that might be a negotiation tool for you to kind of, reduce the price on some of these units if they're in rough shape. But our process would be going in and doing an inspection on possession day, and document all that, have the tenant sign off so it's up to date, and that way any damage going forward past whatever's already there, then that's something that you would be able to deduct or charge for, right?
So you're saying it's never too late to do an initial walkthrough if it
No, that's
wasn't
right.
done initially at the stage that it should have been.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and again, if you are going to be doing that, and purchasing the property, that's fine, like you said. But go in and do that, because what you don't want is, again, it's already in rough shape, and then 2 or 3 years down the road, now it's like, okay, they moved out, didn't do that inspection 2 or 3 years ago, and now this place is absolutely trashed, and now you're unfortunately gonna have to foot the bill on that. And you can't charge in the back, and you can't hold the damage deposit either, right? That has to go back to the tenant then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So number 4 was the rent increases. Number 5 is
Number 5, sorry, yeah, number 4 was kind of the rent
the
increases and
combinations.
understanding that, yeah, it was a combination of just
Okay.
having the move-in inspections and
And the move-in
understanding the
inspection.
lease.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's number 5?
Number 5 is ensuring that the repairs and maintenance are actually done correctly the first time, because those can cost you thousands of dollars. When you're going back, trying to fix things that were done previously by someone else, or you hired someone that wasn't trained properly, that can cost you a lot of money, right? So yeah, just making sure that the plumbing work was done correctly. The roof, if it was replaced, making sure that you've got that inspected to make sure it was done correctly too, because we see that pretty frequently where it's like, oh yeah, the roof was replaced 4 or 5 years ago, but in reality, they basically just re-roofed over the old roof and it wasn't done properly, right? So things like that, making sure downspouts are actually connected, eaves aren't plugged. You're going to deal with water is going to be your biggest enemy when it comes to properties, right? Whether it is plumbing related or rainwater. So making sure that that's dealt with. Grading around the building, make sure you don't have negative grading where water's running back towards window wells, and around the property. And then yeah, when you're doing renovations, like making sure you're using good quality materials. I mean, there are some things that maybe you can choose to save costs on, but like number one thing that I see people cheap on, and it ends up costing them more money in the long run, is flooring. By using cheap flooring, vinyl plank, if you can get stuff for $1.50 or $2, you would get it on sale from a flooring store, whatever the case may be. But often there's no warranty on that stuff. The locking mechanisms where they join up start to snap, and that just becomes a nightmare to deal with when you got tenants living in a property. And now, what do you do? So those can be big problems. So yeah, just making sure that repairs and maintenance are done properly the first time, because again, going back and trying to redo them, or trying to fix what was done previously, can end up costing you more money in the long run for sure.
Yeah. It can be very expensive. Yep.
Yeah.
So if you listen back to these 5 things, you have a higher probability of success, and you're probably setting yourself up for greater victory than majority of the landlords, right? And you'd like to think that most property management groups handle all 5 to the integrity and confidence that Garnet is stating, but I can tell you that they're not. Just because you're hiring a professional service doesn't always mean that you're getting the professional service. And so it's still important to do your due diligence with whoever you hire, whoever you bring onto your power team. I usually recommend get referrals, find out who people are using, get their feedback. How has it been? How long have you been working with them? What are things you like? What are some things that you're challenged with? And then have a call with them and make sure that you have a good, that you feel confident with their services. And so Garnet, I always love our conversations, and you got any fun stories for us? Anything that you've experienced recently? It could be fun, it could be scary, it could be gross. Give us your best story, your best property management story.
Okay, let's see here. I got a few of them. We took over management of a property where the owner was living out of province. He was managing the property we were probably 6 months into that lease, and 6 months in, then things started going sideways. I think tried subletting the property. The tenants weren't responsive, so he had a friend or family member go over to check on the property, and sure enough, there were 5 or 6 occupants in this house now instead of it just being the couple that was supposed to be in there originally. So yeah, when we took over, obviously went in, did our inspection, and there was one room down there that was basically kind of blocked off, and there was no flooring or anything. It was just a blank, basically had a door, but it was unfinished, still concrete floors. But they were allowing the dogs and to go down there, and that was kind of their bathroom. So they would just poop all over on the floors in there. So again, self-managing is not always the easiest thing to do from afar. But again, this property specifically was in a D class area, right? So you're just got to understand they do need a little bit more. You need to be a little bit more hands-on when it comes to those C and D areas, I would say. So trying to manage a property from out of province in a D area might not be the easiest thing for you to do unless you've got, like I said, a good team that you can rely on, or a handyman, someone that's willing to do some of those checks and inspections and things like that, right?
Yeah. Speaking of an out of province investor purchasing in a D area, we had an investor purchase a property in one of those communities, and they got possession, but they left the property vacant for 2 months. And the 2 months were November and December. We gained possession in October. And so naturally what happens is in the colder months, people need places to stay, and they won't always ask your permission to stay
That's right.
in your property. And if they know it's vacant, because they'll know it's vacant if they see nobody there. So they had numerous people break in and live in the home. And it took for the city of Edmonton, I think Edmonton police, to call the owner, pull title, call the owner, let them know, like, hey, you have people living in your house that probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Owner obviously is alarmed, but again, they left it empty for 2 months because they weren't really sure what they were going to do. And so the city of Edmonton boarded up the city boarded up the home, and they broke in again. So then they had to board it up further, and then there was another break-in. So then they had to put a fence around the property.
Oh, jeez.
And it got to the point where they stripped everything inside the house that had any type of value. There was a toilet on the second floor that was completely full of unflushable waste matter.
Right.
And it was just an absolute complete mess. And so they purchased this home, and it depreciated so fast because they never got that team to help them with the next steps. And so it really can be putting yourself in a tough situation. And vacant properties in the wintertime or the colder months, you definitely want to watch out for. All year you want to watch out for, but especially in the colder months because it can be very, very challenging. So vacant properties in cold weather in the winter, in my opinion, there's only bad things that can happen in the most case, whether it's furnaces freezing up, whatever it is. So don't recommend it. If you need to get those vacant properties tenanted, give Garnet a call.
That's right. And quick little note, if it's vacant, make sure you shut the water off to the house so that if something does freeze, it doesn't become a
I've been in
bigger
an
issue
ice
than it needs
house.
to be.
There's a house in St. Albert, interesting enough. This couple went away to Florida for 2 months, and in the first 2 weeks that they were gone, the pipes burst because they never so it's very common where your exhaust or your intake with your furnace can get clogged, and if your intake gets clogged with ice through condensation, very, very common, your furnace will shut down. And then if your furnace shuts down, the temperature in your house cannot get controlled, and so your pipes will start to freeze, and if there's water in those pipes, the water will expand and it'll burst, and whatever the water touches will freeze. And this entire house was like an ice castle. And so their house naturally was only worth like the cost of the dirt that was on, and it went from probably being worth $430,000 to like $270,000. And because they weren't checking up on the property within 48 hours or 72, depending on what your insurance policy is, I don't think insurance even covered them. So think about how expensive of a mistake that was. And so I like to share those stories so then you as investors can listen and not make the same mistakes. And we're going to talk a lot about, mistakes that investors make and so much more at Recon. Garnet, what are you most excited for about Recon for 2025? Because this is the second year you've been a part of Recon.
That's right. Well, this one, I'm excited also just to be in the room with other like-minded investors, but I think this is just going to be a different style of event compared to other real estate events out there, right? Doing the deal tank, you know, these breakout rooms. You can have direct access to all these investors that have their hands in a whole bunch of different things, right? Whether it's burrs or you've got flips, you know, wholesalers. You know, it's going to be exciting.
Absolutely. Our theme is deals this year, so we're doing a live deal tank, which is essentially the real estate version of Shark Tank, and we're going to have deals both from residential infill, you know, multifamily, creative, that are only available in Recon. And I was advised we're going to have maybe 20 to 30 of those deals.
Very cool.
I think all off market actually. So very excited. Garnet, we're going to see you guys very soon. AG Property Services, give them a shout, ask them questions, or see them at the event, introduce yourself, and get that partnership started. Garnet, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure
Beautiful.
chatting with you. And we'll
Thanks
see you
much,
very
Calvin.
soon, okay?
See you soon. Thank you.
Of course.
Cheers.